What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Underdog Podcast. Today, we're going over my Wildcard reactions from the last weekend. We'll be breaking down every matchup, kind of my thoughts on both teams. We'll go more in depth on the losing side of the matchup because we'll go more in depth on the winners when we get to the divisional round preview. That will come out on Friday, probably. And then, I think on Saturday I'll touch base on kind of the coaching carousel, kind of my thoughts. We saw John Harbaugh get hired late last night. So I will touch base on all that stuff. I think we'll do that probably either Saturday or early next week. But without further ado, let's get right into it. Starting with our first game on Saturday, we got Rams and Panthers. This was a closer game than I think a lot of people thought. We're in a picks pool, and we had playoff picks this week, and the spread for the game I think was 10.5. And I took the Panthers to cover. I thought this game would be a closer game than people would expect. I think home field advantage in the playoffs is a real thing, and I think you saw that, in every game that we had. But I think particularly this game, I think the Panthers they played pretty well. I think better than some people had expected them to play. I thought that Bryce Young continued to be, kind of what we saw him throughout the season of being, an above-average quarterback. I thought he made some really nice plays. That throw to Coker, for that touchdown was awesome. At the end of the game to put the Panthers up. At the end of the game, it was just kind of a shame that they, that they ended up losing that game the way they did, playing, prevent defense at the end of the game. That's never the way to go. You gotta put some pressure on the quarterback and stuff like that. But I felt that Bryce played pretty well. Considering that stage against a team that they had already played, and a team that they had beaten, but a team that was better than them for sure. I think that there will be some questions that Carolina has to answer. I think their run game, the second half of the season was just pitiful. Whether it was Chuba or Rico or whomever, that was a really, pitiful portion of their game. And I think, again, their pass rush, not being, really impactful at all throughout the season was a big blemish on this team. I think that, their run defense was pretty good in this game. They kind of held Kyren and Corum in check. Kyren Williams only had 57 yards on 13 carries, and Blake Corum had 45 on 11 carries. So I felt like their run defense has been, which has been pretty good all year, was good again on Saturday. It's just they couldn't get after the quarterback. When they did get, pressure on Matthew Stafford, it did affect him. They got pressure on the one interception that he threw. That was a great play by Mike Jackson, who had a fantastic season, and he was great in this game. So was J.C. Horn, but I think that the Panthers do need to bring somebody in here who can get after the quarterback. It kind of was always interesting to me that they let Jadeveon Clowney walk out the door, who is a better run defender than he is a pass rusher historically, but he was really good for them last year. I felt like that was kind of an interesting move, and the lone sack in this game they got was Travis Gibson, with a cleanup sack here. But I think there's a lot to like for Carolina. I think, Bryce Young, obviously, they picked up the fifth-year option with him. I think that was a good move. I think if he, takes a step up, then you can sign him to a contract extension. If he stays the same, you maybe consider franchise tagging him. And if he doesn't play very well, then you just let him walk, and you don't really have any qualms about that. But I think Bryce at this point in time has played, better than I think a lot of people would give him credit for. I think he's right around that, that 16 range for the quarterbacks that we have, in the league today. And I think that, if they get their run game more consistent throughout next season, I think that they'll be, a much more balanced offense. I think they had points in time where they were maybe even the best run offense in the league on an EPA per play wise, but that second half of the year, it was definitely a lot worse. And I think Looking at the receiving game, huge game from Jalen Coker. I think he's one of the more underrated receivers in the league. He made a couple of really big plays. There was the dig, the long 52-yard dig that he had that was really awesome. And then, of course, the touchdown at the end of the game to go up was really good. And then Tetairoa McMillan, he was incredible, man. The NFL overthought this one for sure. He had a phenomenal rookie season. He should be the offensive rookie of the year. He was outstanding, for the Panthers. He had 5 for 81 in this game. I felt like he was, the Rams were trying to take him away, and he was still finding ways to be an impact for them out there. And then Xavier Legette, man, oh my God, this dude's brutal, man. Get him out of here. Ship him out of here. I think he's like the most obvious former first round pick trade candidate that there is, and Xavier Legette. I mean, he's just brutal out there, man. I think that's really all I have from Carolina's perspective. I think really, good season. I thought Dave Canales as well in this game was fantastic coaching-wise. I think that there was a little bit of a question mark with him kind of throughout the season. I felt like he hadn't, lived up to the billing that he had in year one. I think that he was kind of more so on a downward trajectory, but I think that in this game, he coached a brilliant game. I think after the first quarter, they really made a lot of good adjustments, and they were attacking that, poor Rams secondary that has kind of plagued them all year. And I think that, they put out a really good performance, man. I think that if you're a Carolina Panthers fan, you have to feel excited about next year, especially with how weak their division is. We don't really know what Atlanta's going to be next year, especially with kind of, Penix missing the back half of the year. They have a head coach vacancy right now that they haven't filled yet. The Saints were, kind of came on strong at the end of the season, beat this team twice. So they're going to be an interesting team moving forward. And then you have the Bucs, who kind of like sputtered the back half of the year, had a really good first half, and then they were like 1-7 in the back half of the season. So it's going to be a really interesting division next year. I think the Panthers are in a good spot to compete again and win this division again next season. It'll be interesting to see what upgrades they make to the pass rush specifically, and if they add, any other pieces on the offensive side, maybe a tight end. Although I felt like Tommy Tremble, had a couple clutch catches in this game. He only had 3, but he's good for them in the run game, and he's a solid pass catcher. But I would expect them to maybe add to that room as well. Going to the Rams side here quickly, I think that a lot of people thought this was going to be a blowout for the Rams side. I never felt that way. I thought it was going to be a one-score game for the most part, because I do really, really believe in that home field advantage type thing. I thought Stafford played pretty well. I think there was like the middle part of the game he was struggling, and I don't know if that was fully on when he hit his hand on his offensive lineman's helmet, or it was kind of the Panthers getting more pressure on him during that point in time, because I think that was the point in time where they got a little bit of pass rush. But I felt like that the last drive he was phenomenal. When you're an MVP candidate, you find ways to dig deep, get it done, and he did. Then Puka Nacua, outstanding. He should win Offensive Player of the Year in my opinion. I think he's the best weapon in the league. He was phenomenal in that game. He was borderline uncoverable. That the route he had to score that first touchdown was gross, man. He just cooked them all game. And Devontae Adams, coming back, had a solid game for them. I think the big question for me with the Rams going up against Chicago this week, and we'll talk about that more, in my divisional breakdown, is who else is going to step up for this team as a receiver, because Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua, of Matthew Stafford's 42 attempts, combined for 31 targets. 31! That's absurd. So I definitely think that somebody else is going to have to step up for them. And then defensively, I think it was big for the Panthers to have Robert Hunt back, because they didn't get as much pressure as everybody thought they would. They only had 2 sacks in this game, and that secondary was putrid, man. And I felt like tackling was a big issue in this game. I felt like the Rams missed a lot of tackles. Particularly on Coker was making a bunch of guys miss. So I think that the Rams' biggest issues going into next week are, their secondary was getting torched, and the Bears have a better receiver room than the Panthers do. We saw Colston Loveland had a big game too. So that, adds another element to them as well. And I think the pass rush needs to be better. I know that this Panthers O-line is really good, and the Bears, I don't know if it's as good because, Trapillo just got hurt as well, but they definitely need to, make some more plays on that side of the ball. I felt like Jared Verse was kind of non-existent in this game. I think he needs to be a much bigger force, in the game against Chicago next week. And speaking of Chicago, that is our next game here on Saturday night. We have the Bears beating the Packers. I was wrong about this one. I thought the Packers were going to win. It took a 25-point fourth quarter for the Bears to get it done, but they did get it done. So let's talk about the Packers. I picked this team to win. This one was a coin flip for me, though. I thought that the Packers were going to win because they had been in the 7th seed before. This is the third year in a row they were 7th seed. The first year they went into Dallas and beat the brakes off of the Cowboys. And then last year, they kind of started, in the worst way possible with the fumbled kick by Keyshawn Nixon, and they kind of never really got back on track. I picked the Packers because of the that playoff experience. I thought that LaFleur and Love are big time in the playoffs. Even in the games that the Packers have lost, I felt like they've both been playoff risers. And Jordan Love was fantastic in this game. 323 and 4 touchdowns. I mean, he was awesome. Even in the second half when that Packers offense was sputtering, I still felt like Love was playing really well. Excuse me. And I felt like, they tried to put the ball in the hands of Josh Jacobs too much in the second half. And, he had 19 carries, average under 3 yards a carry. And Jacobs had kind of been a little bit banged up throughout the year. And I felt like they needed to, put the ball in the hands of Love more. And they were really relying on Jacobs to start that second half to, burn the clock a little bit, because they were up 21-3 at that point in time, and it just didn't really work. Romeo Doubs had a fantastic game in this one. Unfortunately, he's probably not going to be back with Green Bay, but he's going to get a bag somewhere. And I've always liked Romeo Doubs. If you go back to my 2022 draft grades, I really love that pick for the Packers, and he really has broken out this year. He was fantastic. Matthew Golden as well. I think all the people that were saying he's a first-round bust were not watching the Packers. He was consistently their best wide receiver on tape. He was getting open all the time. He was getting separation. He just, had some mental errors, some drops, and, he was hurt throughout the year. But I felt like Matthew Golden really kind of showcased his talent on Saturday night. He was really, really good for them. Jaden Reed was also really good. He had, a bad drop at the end of the game that kind of, maybe cost the Packers there. Watson was kind of okay in this one. I felt like offensively, though, for the Packers, they just didn't continue to do what they had success with in the first half. And I think that, costed them in this one for sure, along with, we'll get to the special teams, but along with special teams as well. Defensively, I think that, the Packers in the first half, they really in the first three quarters, they really had, the Bears in a bind. I think that they did a really, really good job of limiting the run game, particularly when, Monangai was in there. He didn't have any really room to run at all. And Swift, it was really like 4-yard cuts for Swift rather than anything big time. I think their biggest thing was they just could not cover Colston Loveland. I mean, it didn't matter if it was, Edgerrin Cooper or Isaiah McDuffie or Quay Walker. Like, none of these guys could cover Colston Loveland. I mean, he was open all game, and the secondary which was the biggest problem for Green Bay, coming into the year and throughout the year, I think was a big, was the big difference in this one. I think that, Keyshawn Nixon really struggled in this game. I think that, what's his face? Valentine struggled in this game, despite having the interception that he should have dropped. I think he struggled in this game. I think outside of Xavier McKinney and Evan Williams, it was big time struggles in the secondary for the Green Bay Packers in this one. And then special teams wise, like, I don't know what it is about this team, but year after year after year in the playoffs, they just cannot, for whatever reason, they cannot do anything on special teams properly. McManus with 2 huge missed kicks in this game, and a missed extra point that, was a huge difference in this game. Because if he makes that extra point, it's a 3-point game, and they were in position to kick a field goal. And man, it was just brutal from the Packers to see them continue to just time and time again to just screw up on special teams. It was just absolutely brutal for them, man. The people that were calling for Matt LaFleur to be fired are, I don't understand, because Matt LaFleur for 100% is a phenomenal coach. He's one of the 10 best coaches in football. And while time and time again the Packers haven't really gotten over that hump yet, I think I just, for whatever reason, I'm just, and I know that they blew, a 18-point lead in this game, but for whatever reason, they can't execute anything on special teams. And I don't know, it doesn't really matter if it's the coach or not, because Rich Bisaccia is a really, really good special teams head coordinator. He's really, really good at that. And when he was the interim head coach in Las Vegas, it was a big deal and everything. But man, they just, I don't know if they're cursed or what, but oh my gosh, man, they just could not figure it out on the special team side of things. And I think going forward, if you're Green Bay, I think that you look on this and you say, you gotta upgrade, the secondary for sure. I think that's your biggest problem. And then, you got Dobbs walking out the door, with in the receiver room, and you got a couple of these other guys. I think they really got to figure out what their sort of rotation is, going forward in the receiving room. I think that they, with all the injuries and stuff that happened, I think the only constant guy that was really there was Dobbs, so I think they do need to get some sort of rotation-esque going there, because I think a lot of these guys are talented. It's just whether or not they can execute at the right portion in time. Going over to Chicago side of things here. Biggest thing I would say is Caleb Williams was phenomenal. I know he threw 2 picks in this game. One of them was pretty bad. But that throw to Rome Odunze, where he's rolling left, getting clipped at the ankles, was incredible. I mean, one of the best throws I've ever seen. Caleb Williams was fantastic. I think everybody, put such a high expectation on him from the get-go. And, last year things didn't kind of work out. He didn't have the best coaching or whatever. And Ben Johnson comes in here. They win the division. They beat Green Bay, at home in the playoffs. They hadn't done that since, I think it was a week after Pearl Harbor. That was the last time they had beaten the Packers in the playoffs, was, a week after Pearl Harbor, which is insanity. And I think that this just goes to show that coaching really does matter, because the Bears for so long had been the bad news Bears. They had been, just kind of if they got to the playoffs, it was win a game, maybe, and get eliminated. And now you've got the quarterback in Caleb Williams. You've got the coach in Ben Johnson. You've got the pieces around them. I think, the one thing that they need to, improve is their defense. But shout out to the Bears, man. Obviously, like, huge game for Colston Loveland, another guy who really had gotten a lot of criticism. He had a really slow start, really slow 6 weeks. After he got integrated, man, he was awesome. He was, in my opinion, like, if I had an All-Pro vote, he would have been my second-team All-Pro tight end because I thought he was just really good in all facets of the game, and he was the best player on the field in this game, maybe other than Caleb Williams for Chicago. He was just incredible. DJ Moore, I felt really good for DJ Moore catching that touchdown because he just kind of had like a rough season last year in Chicago. He kind of had a rough year this year. That was a big moment for him. It was really cool to see that. I've always been a fan of DJ Moore, and that was big time for him to catch that touchdown in that moment. And Rome Odunze and Luther Burden coming back, that was huge for the Chicago team. They, contributed there as well. And then I think defensively, I think Dennis Allen deserves a lot of credit. They really stood up in the second half and really had a big time stand against this really good Packers offense. Tremaine Edmonds had a really, really good game, although he got away with the PI in the end zone, in my opinion, against Luke Musgrave, but he had a really good game. Austin Booker had a really good game. Kevin Byard had a really good game. I felt like this defense, when they needed to most, they stepped up big time for the Chicago Bears team. And even on special teams, Devin Duvernay, he had a huge punt return, like a 40-yard punt return, to kind of set up Chicago. So I think that it was just a team effort from the Chicago Bears, and I think that they have put everybody on notice that they are they are here. And I didn't think that they were going to win this playoff game because I felt like, the Packers had been there before. They had the experience, everything. And, sometimes that doesn't matter, man. Sometimes it doesn't matter. And Caleb Williams and co for sure deserve a lot of credit because they played awesome down the stretch in this game. I mean, what a game for the Chicago Bears. I'm looking forward to that matchup against the Rams on Sunday night. It's going to be a really good football game. Moving over to the Sunday slate. First game we had on Sunday was Bills-Jags. And another game that I got wrong. Bills fans, you can come after me in the comment section below. I did not think you were going to get it done. I also had Jacksonville in my Super Bowl. So, that's not looking great right now. But let's not talk about that. Let's start with the Jags, though. This was the most, Trevor Lawrence-esque game from the last couple of years. Not this season, the last couple of years. The 2 interceptions he threw, the first one, he just did not see the defender over the middle of the field. I mean, it was a bad interception. It really was bad. And then from there on out, he was really good until the last throw of the game, where he threw a ball, I believe it was to Parker Washington. I'd have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure it was Parker Washington who was covered and the ball was tipped and it was intercepted. And I think that, that's kind of the epitome of the last couple of years with Trevor is he has some of these boneheaded, mistakes, kind of like, Justin Herbert, where, he's playing really well and then he'll do something really stupid and it'll be 2-3 throws a game and it cost Jacksonville in this one. And I really thought that they were going to pull this one out. I just felt like they were playing the best football of anybody, maybe other than Houston in the AFC down the stretch. I mean, they were on an 8-game win streak, and I felt like it was just going to be their year. And I was wrong. I mean, they almost got it done. They just couldn't get a stop. And I can't believe that Buffalo, with a minute left in the game, scored, purposefully scored. I would have kneeled it and then scored, and I was like, a minute 5 left, Jacksonville's going to go down, kick a field goal, we're going to go to overtime, and then we'll see what happens from there, and just didn't happen. And, I do have some criticisms of Liam Cohen in this game. The run game was working really well. Byshell Tootin had a big run in this game. Travis Etienne was very efficient in this game at 6.7 yards a carry. Even T-Law with his legs was, adding to that as well. He had 6 for 31 in this game, and they went away from it in the second half. And I don't understand why, because their run game was really good. and their run game at points in time had been really good this season. And the Bills' weakness was stopping the run. They were like 30th in the league against the run. So I don't know why they went away from the run so much. I mean, they were more of a balanced offense. It was 30 passes to 23 carries, but I would have ran the football a lot more in this game. I mean, the Bills clearly could not stop the run. I mean, they gave up 6.7 yards a carry total in this game, 23 for 154. And I just, I don't understand why they kept, kept going away from it. But in terms of the passing game, Parker Washington was amazing in this game. He was awesome. And I always felt like when he fell in the draft in the 6th round that wasn't, he should have went a lot higher. I felt like he was, much better than advertised coming out of Penn State. And he has broken out in the biggest way down the stretch of this season. He has been awesome for the Jags. Jacoby Myers didn't have a ton of impact in this game. I felt like the Bills actually did a really good job of like taking him out of the game plan, but he had been really, really good for this Jags team. I think since they had gotten him, their EPA per dropback was like it was like 0.2 something. And like he made just all the difference. It was let me see here. I have it pulled up. It was 0.207 with him, and it was negative 0.021 before him. It was 5 times above the average EPA per dropback, like league wide. I mean, that's incredible. So, I know that their pass game had really improved, but I felt like I would have just went with the run on this one. Defensively, I felt like they played pretty well in this game. Josh Hines-Allen was making an impact for sure. Devin Lloyd was making an impact. He had a phenomenal game. He had the fumble recovery. On the kickoff by Ray Davis. I think just at the end of the game, it was like just Josh Allen kind of being Josh Allen, and they couldn't really stop him. But I think if you're the Jags, moving forward, I think that you have to be excited. The Liam Cohen, Trevor Lawrence duo really worked, and this is without Travis Hunter. Don't forget about that, Jags fans. You're getting Travis Hunter back next year. It's going to be really interesting to see. Etienne's a free agent, right? I believe Travis Etienne's a free agent. What they're going to do on that front. And then I think the other thing, too, with them re-signing Jacoby Myers, which was a phenomenal move, by the way, what they're going to do with Brian Thomas Jr. Because I think that is also very interesting what they're going to do there as well. And then Parker Washington, he is also a free agent, I think, right? It's 2022 draft class. So 2022, 2023, he's a free agent. So that'll be interesting to see whether or not they bring him back. There's going to be some interesting things to look out for with this Jags team, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, with Travis Hunter coming back, with Etienne and Washington being free agents, with Brian Thomas Jr. kind of having a sour second season. It'll be very interesting to see, but I think, and Anthony Campanelli and Grant Udinski, also those two deserve a lot of credit. They were phenomenal hires for, the coordinator positions, and I think that, Liam Cohen did a really good job of building his staff. Campanelli is getting head coaching interviews right now. I don't know if Udinski's gotten one yet or not, but he's a very intriguing name in the offseason, maybe the most intriguing name, most dark horse candidate out there right now. And I think James Gladstone, the GM for the Jags, going to, have a really interesting offseason with, no first-round pick, how he's going to kind of retool this team. Going to the Bills side of things, Sean McDermott, I owe you an apology because I think that his defensive game plan was pretty phenomenal. Obviously they struggled to stop the run, but we kind of knew that. But I think McDermott was in his bag, and I think that in past playoff games that has not been the case. I think his defenses have been the Achilles heel, and they're gonna need to show up, especially going on the road against Denver this week. But I felt like Defensively, that was probably the best playoff performance they had in a really, really long time. So kudos to them. Defensively, I felt like they were really big time on that side of the ball. Shaq Thompson had a lot of big plays in this game. You know, he's had playoff experience with Carolina, and, you know, I think that he had probably his best game of the season. Greg Rousseau was big time in this game. You know, he was definitely getting pressure on Trevor Lawrence for sure. He was being an impact in the run game. Christian Benford was really good. You know, on the outside, he was really good in coverage, and he had a big time deflection on a blitz. And Tre'Davious White turning back the clock. I mean, what a game from him. He was, you know, like old school Trey White, you know, where he was one of the best corners in the league during the peak of his powers. He had his best game in years, man. He was incredible there. It looked like he had found the fountain of youth. And then Teron Johnson getting the game-winning pass breakup, and then Cole Bishop getting the getting that interception there. That was big for the Bills at the end of the game to kind of close it out that way. And Josh Allen, he was great. Phenomenal in this game. He continues to be a really good postseason performer, and he, you know, gets his first playoff win on the road. And on top of that, I think Khalil Shakir, really, really good. 12 catches on 12 targets was really big for them in that screen game, you know, kind of opening up Kincaid and Knox down the field. But this receiving core depleted now. Gabe Davis and Tyrell Shavers tear their ACLs in this game. So they're going to be rolling with Shakir, Coleman, and Cooks. For the most part, I don't know who else they have there. They would have to go like deep in the bag for who else they have on the outside. So that's going to be something to monitor next week for them. And then the run game, I mean, the Jags did a really good job of stopping it. Like, James Cook was really a non-factor in the run game. Josh had 2 rushing touchdowns, but really, I mean, outside of a couple scrambles, he was held in check as well in the run game here. So, you know, I think if you're Buffalo, like, there was the narrative of a lot of people giving them, like, they don't have an excuse for, like, not making the Super Bowl. These teams are really good, man. Like, the Jags are a really good team, and I know that, like, you know, they ended up beating them here, but, like, Denver, as much as I'm, like, not the biggest believer in them, you know, I do think that that's a really good football team over there, and, you know, New England and Houston are no slouches either, so I don't think that it's, like, a cakewalk that, like, everybody is, like, seeming it to be, but we'll see, you know, how they fare next week at Mile High. Going on to the afternoon game here, we have the 49ers and the Eagles. Another game that I got incorrectly. This was the last game that I got incorrectly. I thought the Eagles were going to win this football game. And it was predicated mainly on the 49ers being hurt, especially with Pearsall being out. But they got it done. And I want to talk about this Philadelphia offense real quick. So Kevin Patullo got fired. We know that happened. I think after the first 3 drives, Philadelphia offensively had a total of, let me see here, 67, 101 total yards. That's terrible. That is terrible, man. So let me start with, I'll start with Jalen Hurts here. I've never been the biggest Jalen Hurts believer. I said the moment after the Super Bowl, the first one, in which he played phenomenally, outplayed Patrick Mahomes, and they gave him $52 million, that he would never be worth that contract, and he hasn't been worth that contract. I don't care that he won you a Super Bowl last year. He has not been worth the contract with his level of play. There's a lot of blame to go around here in Philadelphia for why they have a first-round exit. Nick Sirianni deserves a lot of that blame because I don't really know what Nick Sirianni does at this point in time. He does a lot of nothing. Kevin Patullo deserves a lot of the blame because the offense that Philly was running was a high school offense. And a lot of it is like his play design, but a lot of it too is Jalen Hurts, because Jalen Hurts can't run a normal offense because he can't see the middle of the field. He can't read it. And when he does try and read it, it usually results in bad quarterback play. The Chargers game is a really good example of that. He was awful in that game. They tried to do a lot of that stuff, and they can't. That's why when you see Jalen Hurts throwing a bunch of hitches, a bunch of checkdowns, it's because he can read that very easily. He can't really read over the middle of the field. And even on the last drive, when Philadelphia had a chance to win the game, over the middle of the field, he threw it. I think the last 3 plays were over the middle of the field, and they were all 3 terrible reads and terrible throws. So Jalen Hurts, it's really tough to win with him as your quarterback. It's really tough to design an offense with him as your quarterback because it has to be very gimmicky, very high schoolish, because he's not a quarterback that's going to, read the middle of the field very well. He's very good at throwing outside the numbers, in whether it's a hitch or a go ball. Jalen Hurts is very good at doing that, and he's very good at using his athleticism. He's not very good at throwing over the middle of the field unless if it's like, an underneath drag route or something like that. That's not his game. And I think that is a big, a big part of why the Eagles failed was Jalen Hurts. I'm not excusing Kevin Patullo because he was a terrible offensive coordinator, but he had to work around Jalen Hurts, and he clearly didn't know how to do that. He clearly didn't know how to play to Jalen Hurts' strengths. Saquon Barkley had probably his best game of the year. I don't really know if it was, the run design or like the O-line play. I know that it kind of, dropped off a little bit. And Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens didn't have as good of years as they did last year. And I know that Lane Johnson was hurt, for the majority of the season. But, Saquon didn't have as good of a year. He had probably his best game of the year in this one. He was really dynamic running the football in this game, and it was good to see kind of that version of Saquon Barkley still in there. Devontae Smith had a phenomenal game. I felt like he was the best weapon for them, out there on Sunday. A.J. Brown had a terrible game. 2 big, drops in this one. And I know that a lot of people are, getting on A.J. Brown or whatever, and rightfully so because he didn't have a great game, but I don't blame him for being upset. You're playing in a gimmicky offense, a high school level offense where, for a portion of the season you weren't, being involved in that offense, and he's definitely like a big-time playmaker. I felt like he was out of shape to start the year, though, and then as he got in shape, he got, more contribution and stuff like that. And I definitely think that depending on who comes in here as the offensive coordinator, A.J. Brown could be on his way out, especially because you have Devontae Smith here, and Jahan Dotson, who, only had 1 target in this game. But I felt like when he's gotten the opportunity, he's done good things, and I think that he can be a nice 2 next to Devontae Smith, potentially. But I think that there's going to be a lot of answers that need to be had on Philadelphia's offensive side of the ball, particularly. I felt like their defense played well, man. Their defense has played well all year. Coached by Vic Fangio, I felt like, Cooper DeJean played a pretty good game. Quinyon Mitchell had a pretty good game. 3 passes defensed. He was getting picked on a little bit on that first drive, but I think after that he kind of settled in. He had a really, really good season for them. I felt like Zach Bond had a good year. They weren't really able to get after Brock Purdy, which I think was a big issue. They only had 1 sack in this game. But I do think that they had a really good, had a really good year defensively, and, they held San Francisco to 23 points, which I think is good enough for them to win the game. 13 of them came in the fourth quarter, but at some point in time, your offense has to step up, and they didn't do that in this game. Not after the first 3 drives, they didn't really step up at all. So going to San Francisco side of things here, I thought Brock Purdy was great. He had, the 2 interceptions, but I felt like he was great in this game. Really poised, especially down the stretch, getting the ball to McCaffrey on the Texas route, that was gross, man. Demarcus Robinson, big game for them. Had, started off with a 61-yard, completion there and ended in a touchdown. Like, just a big time performance from Brock Purdy from this offense. Run game didn't go anywhere, but the pass game was really big. Particularly from Robinson, McCaffrey, didn't really get much production from the others, but Juwan Jennings, being a legendary playoff quarterback, throwing a touchdown in this one again, and having a big catch for them, and defensively, like, credit to them making the adjustments. Robert Saleh deserves all the praise in the world. This dude has been incredible, with, backup, linebackers, third-string linebackers, with some inexperienced corners outside of Diamador Lenore, like, just a phenomenal job, man. He deserves, like, all the credit in the world. Robert Saleh has been probably the best coordinator in the league this year, and Kyle Shanahan deserves a lot of credit. He probably should win Coach of the Year. Like, I know Mike Vrabel's the favorite. I know Liam Cohen did a phenomenal job, but, like, San Francisco being on the brink of being the 1 seed and going into Philadelphia and winning a playoff game with all these injuries, like, that deserves, like, an immense amount of praise. Like, shout out to Kyle Shanahan. He's a phenomenal coach, and he continues to do a phenomenal job there in San Francisco. And I'll be I'll forever, like, root for Kyle Shanahan as coach, because I just think he's damn good coach, really good guy. And they're gonna have a handful next week against Seattle, but I'll be very much looking forward to that game. And now for the night game, Patriots and Chargers. I was at this game. It was my first time at Gillette Stadium, and it was fantastic atmosphere. I think a lot of people are going to say that this game was boring, which I can understand from that standpoint if you were watching it on TV, but the crowd was into it the whole time. This game was freaking electric, man. So let's start with the Chargers here. Obviously, like, Greg Roman got fired, and I think that was the right decision. They just didn't really have it offensively this year. I think that Greg Roman doesn't really fit with what Justin Herbert does well, and I think he deserves a lot of blame. He deserves a lot of blame for their ineffectiveness on Sunday, to say the least. Justin Herbert was not good in this game. He was really, really bad. He missed a lot of throws, and his pocket presence in this game was terrible. Like, he sacked himself at least twice. Like, Pats had 6 sacks in this game. I think 2 of them were, like, on Herbert, and I think that fumble was on Herbert. Like, he stepped up right into the rush. Granted, he was their leading rusher. Like, run game, didn't really do anything. Omarion Hampton wasn't healthy. He only had the 1 carry in the game, and Vidal had, like, 1 good run on first down, and then, like, the fumble recovery that he had, they picked up for a first down. Other than that, like, they got nothing in the run game, and they kept trying to, like, run the football, and it just didn't work. And these receivers were in hell, man. Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis had Quentin Johnston and Keenan Allen in hell. I mean, they could not get any ounce of separation. They were all over them on Sunday. I mean, they, like, Ladd McConkey, he was, like, the guy that was, like, getting open, like, the most, and it wasn't really consistent, and he really wasn't getting targeted, which I don't really understand. But yeah, man, they were in hell on Sunday, and the O-line was obviously terrible. It doesn't help that they had, like, 2 backup tackles out there, but their O-line was terrible in that game. As far as, like, defensively goes, Odafe Oweh was a terror on Sunday. Like, he was really good. Tyre Tart was really good. Tuli Pelotu, like, their pass rush was really good. Dion Henley had a really phenomenal game. He had the interception in that game off the tip ball from Tyre Tart. I felt like their defense was really good. The Pats were able to move the ball a little bit, but the Chargers defense, like, credit to them. They really, like, gave us a really tough time out there. Their pass rush was definitely, like, affecting May a little bit. And, I felt like I said, Henley and Still, they had really good games out there. And they kept our receivers in check for the most part. Like, outside of really Kayshon Boutte, like, Diggs didn't really have an impact. Kyle Williams didn't really have an impact. Demario Douglas didn't really have an impact. So I felt like they did a really good job. I think if you would have told me, like, Pats score 16 points, like, I probably would have said that's not good enough. But it was today. I think going forward for the Chargers, they really need to. I mean, obviously, like, the O-line has to stay healthy. Without Slater for the whole year and all for most of it, like, have to stay healthy. And they have to get some perimeter weapons, like, around Justin Herbert. I think Keenan Allen being gone next year is going to be good because Ladd McConkey will get all those, like, premier targets. And Quentin Johnson, I think, took another step, but, like, they need somebody else on the outside that can, like, win one-on-one. Because Johnston, like, whenever he was matched up on either Gonzalez or Davis, was not winning. Consistently at least. So I think that they need somebody out there to really, like, be a difference maker for this team. And obviously, like, no healthy Hampton, like, their run game wasn't, what it would be, but I do think that they need to improve in that area as well. Going over to the Patriots side of things, I think it was funny because ESPN wrote after this article, they're like, don't be fooled by this win. Like, the Patriots still haven't beaten anybody good. And it's like, just keep kicking that can down the road, I guess. Like, they're 15-3 now, and they won a playoff game, and they won the division. Like, continue to be wrong. And my preseason prediction, I had us as a wild card team, so I didn't even have us, like, this good. So, but, like, nobody thought we were going to be here. I mean, even Pats fans, like, we didn't think we were going to win the division and win 15 games in the season. Like, nobody. Drake, I felt like, was good in his first playoff start. He had a little bit of a slow start, and I think that he there were some bad moments in that game. He missed the touchdown to Hooper. He missed a couple of other throws, but I that second half, I mean, he was phenomenal. He was phenomenal in that second half. Leading rusher in this game, he made some really big plays with his legs. He had that long, like, 37-yard scramble. I felt like Drake May had a really good performance this season. Ramondre Stevenson, man, I would like to be owed an apology from everyone out there that said Ramondre Stevenson was a bad football player, because I've been standing up for Ramondre time and time again this season. I said that he was our best running back on our team. I still stand by that. He was phenomenal in this game. He was bruising that line. I'm surprised he only had 10 carries. Looking back, I felt like he had a little bit more than that, but he only had 10 carries. I wanted to see them, like, really utilize him, especially coming out in the second half. Like, I was like, this needs to be like a Ramondre Stevenson drive, because at that point in time it was 6-3. I was like, Ramondre needs to, like, bruise these guys, really get after them or whatever, and he did that. And he had the really long reception to, like, get us started offensively. Like, he was phenomenal in that game, man. Hendo kind of had a rough game, and I don't want to say I expected that, but I felt like it was going to be more of a Ramondre game with the weather and everything like that. And he had that one, like, 15-yard run, and after that he kind of just didn't really have a bunch of room. But I think that he had the biggest blitz pickup of his, like, young career against Deion Henley. That was a really, really good pickup that gave May the touchdown. So thank you for that. Like, biggest play of the game probably was Trevion Henderson's blitz pickup. So shout out to him for that. He's gotten much better down the stretch in the season at doing that. Kayshon Boutte, phenomenal in this game. He should deserve more targets. I feel like I say that every week after the game. Like, why doesn't he get more targets? He was great. Hunter Henry, outside of the first target, the first drop, he was great. Chisholm and Kyle Williams, they didn't have much of an impact in terms of the receiving game, but in the blocking game, like, Kyle Williams had the block that sprung Ramondre Stevenson on that big reception. And Efton Chisholm, he had the big catch. Missed Drake May on the trick play, but that's all right. That happens. And then defensively, like, can't say enough about this team defensively. Awesome game. Milton Williams back. He was a game wrecker. Kayvon Chason, I have been critical of at certain points in time throughout the season. He was great in this game, particularly, pass rushing. He had 2 sacks. He had the forced fumble. Marcus Jones was phenomenal in this game. Other than, the one big reception he allowed to Ladd McConkey, he was phenomenal. I felt like Craig Woodson had one of his best games of his young career, the rookie. Christian Gonzalez was phenomenal in this game. I mean, he was stuck on glue. The play he got hurt on, teach tape, phenomenal. Carlton Davis was phenomenal in this game. He had a BS penalty called on him. Anthony Jennings was awesome in this game too. Like, another guy that I've been advocating for playing more. Like, he's just phenomenal, man. I feel like he's a better player than Harold Landry. That's just my opinion, but he was great. Christian Barmore was great. Entire defense was great. Patriots, really good performance. Looking forward to Sunday afternoon against the Houston Texans, who we're going to talk about next. The Monday Night Football game. Yes, the score was 30-6. No, the game was not that big of a blowout. Starting with the Steelers standpoint, Rodgers, wasn't good in this game. Really bad way to go out for him with the pick six, but he wasn't good in this game. And the mobility was obvious that it wasn't there. Kind of the reason that they lost this game, and them not being able to take advantage of those turnovers was really big too. I think that they had an opportunity to win this football game. This was a winnable football game for Pittsburgh, despite how inept they played. Like, this was a winnable game. They forced a lot of turnovers against C.J. Stroud, and they just couldn't take advantage of them. They couldn't run the football at all in this game either. Warren and Gainwell were pretty much held in check. And then the big thing that we've been preaching all year is that they just didn't have anybody outside of DK Metcalf on the outside. They just didn't. And nobody really made a play. I mean, DK had the one play at the beginning of the game, and other than that, that was it. I mean, they were relying on, Adam Thielen, that was, at the end of his career, obviously retired after the game. Pat Freiermuth only had one catch, wasn't really involved at all, and Calvin Austin really wasn't good in this game. Again, MVS had a couple of catches, but other than that, you forced 4 turnovers against Houston, and you don't take advantage, and you score 6 points. Not going to win a football game like that. And I think defensively, for the most part, they were pretty good. Forcing the turnovers, getting after C.J. Stroud, making him really uncomfortable in the pocket. If you would have told me C.J. Stroud would have played like that, I would have told you the Steelers would have won because, he was not good. He was not good in this game. The Steelers couldn't take advantage of the turnovers that they got. They definitely had a chance to win this game, and I felt like they affected the Texans' offense in a lot of different ways, and they just couldn't take advantage of that. And with Tomlin departing and everything, it's going to be a new era in Pittsburgh. It's going to be really interesting to see what kind of direction they go. I don't really have a ton of thoughts on the game other than they just didn't play very well. I'm going to be going more in depth on kind of their outlook in the Coach Carousel episode. As far as Houston goes, they're lucky to win this game, I think, in my opinion. They outplayed Pittsburgh, but that's not saying a ton. Offensively, I can't believe I'm saying this, but Woody Marks had a really good game. Didn't expect him to average nearly 6 yards a carry. So really good game from Woody Marks. Nick Chubb, only had 10 carries, but he was able to get 5 yards a pop there as well. Christian Kirk, turning back the clock. Did not expect that at all, but he was huge for them in this game. Losing Nico Collins to a concussion, I don't think he's going to play this weekend, is huge. Big blow for them. So they're going to need Higgins and Hutchinson and Knoll to step up. And Stroud, man, that's probably the worst game I've seen him play. He made a couple of big-time throws in the second half, but he was not good in this game, man. He was hard to watch. The fumbles and everything, he just was not comfortable under pressure. He had 5 fumbles in this game. It was ugly, man. It was an ugly, ugly game for them. And then defensively, they just do what they do, man. They're the best defense in the NFL. They made those turnovers count. Obviously, they were returned for touchdowns, but they really they made it count, man. Defensively, they made it count. Jalen Petrie, phenomenal game. Aziz Al-Shire had a really good game. Kalen Bullock obviously had the pick 6. Will Anderson, although he only had a half a sack, like, he was dominant in that game. Sheldon Rankins was really good. Daniil Hunter as well. Like, man, this Texans team, their defense is just really, really good. I think for them, like, the big thing is, will Nico Collins be healthy? I don't know. Will C.J. Stroud play better? I don't know. I think it's going to be a slugfest, that game. The Texans-Patriots think it's going to be another slugfest, but going forward, we'll have to see what happens. Who I pick tomorrow. But thanks for sticking around, everybody, for my wildcard reactions. Hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you tomorrow with my divisional round picks. Peace.